Anyway, so I am Ashish Jaiman. I am Director of Product on Bing Multimedia team at Microsoft. And for last almost 3 years or so, I've been actually looking at the issue of deepfakes and synthetic media with the lens of not only what it can do from a threat modeling perspective, but also what are the good or positive use cases of synthetic media, which Victor actually has a lot to talk about because he's pioneering that space. To begin with, as I said, for the last couple of years, I've been actually very focused on this with the lens of the threat models, and I'm going to share my screen like for next 5 to 10 minutes to just talk about some of the work that we have been doing and how we think about synthetic media. So I am sharing. Let me know when you see it, which I think you can see it. Anyways, so as I said, I'm Ashish Jaiman. I write extensively on Medium as well on this topic, spanning from what it is, defining it, but also positive and malicious uses of synthetic media. Which we call deepfakes, right? So again, there is a lot of taxonomy issue in this space, right? Deepfakes, which has a very negative connotation. I am trying to actually say, hey, deepfakes are malicious use of synthetic media versus synthetic media is not bad at all. There are obviously weaponization of synthetic media, which typically ends up harming the individuals and others, which we'll talk more. And that's what I call deep fakes. But at the end of the day, you can think about using artificial intelligence to create media, manipulate media, uh, or create media is what we call synthetic media, essentially, right? So we want to crisp our definition to say, hey, we're not talking about video editing tools. We're not talking about minor voice modulation. What we are talking about using artificial intelligence to generate or manipulate media is what we'll call synthetic media for my purposes only. And as I said, for last couple of years, we've been thinking about, how does it map back to disinformation issue, which we see since like, I don't know, 8 years now or plus, right? In the US, but across the globe. So just want to define that, when we talk about disinformation, the intent of the creator or the campaign, the person who's manipulating information with the intent to harm is what we call disinformation, right? With that definition, I want to bring back and say, hey, what are the types of synthetic media we're talking about here? AI can manipulate and, as I said, and create synthetic media. One of the key things we see is face swapping. I think that's where it really started getting traction, when we started seeing a lot of face swapping on public channels, essentially out there in the news as well as social media for awareness campaign, but on the dark channels, mostly for revenge pornography and creating harm for women. And that's where everyone started talking about deepfakes and synthetic media. Face swap in 2018 became like more and more, got visibility. Lip syncing, that has been there for longer than face swapping. In fact, if we talk about synthetic voice has been around for longer than what we start to talk about deepfakes in this context of face swap and whatnot. Puppeteering is very interesting as well. It brings everything together, essentially creating a full featured model, synthetically created, which actually not only can talk, but also gesticulate and walk and do everything essentially using this AI technology. Image synthesis, which is very interesting to generate image from nothing, more or less, right? Create videos, images, voice by training, and AI models can generate it from scratch. Voice cloning, again, the same idea, of generating voice from scratch. And then the last one is text generation. Now, text generation is interesting because it is even harder from a text perspective to detect, as well as put the regular eye test or ear test, essentially, to detect something which is fake. In text, it becomes even harder, especially, there are a lot of innovations, both from Microsoft and Google and others, around text generation. And I want to quickly talk about the positive use cases, which obviously other panelists will talk a bit more about. But when we talk about synthetic media, one of the key things I want to call out is the use of synthetic media to have equality and equity in society, especially providing solutions for accessibility. Think about folks with speech impediments actually can use voice cloning technology to communicate with others as they're losing their ability to speak. Similarly, folks who may have other challenges with vision may actually use navigative assistive technologies, essentially, which can create a world with voice so that they can navigate that world, even though they may not be able to see. And all can be generated very, very easily now using artificial intelligence. Education and public safety. There's a lot of innovation in how to deliver lectures, which are artificially using AI, synthetic generated, which are more impactful and have better learning outcomes than traditional way of education. Art and expression, we have seen a lot of storytelling now using AI. So essentially democratizing what Hollywood would spend millions and millions of dollars previously can be done using obviously some powerful machines, but and some code at scale. And we have some examples out there which actually have done that very effectively. Reach and amplification, one of the examples that we see now is in retail, where you can actually get the experience of getting into a retail, let's say a clothing store and trying out clothes. Using AI technology, you actually don't have to physically try on clothes. You can create those environments where you can actually try out clothes and figure out, would it look good on you? And that's just scratching the surface. There's so much more going on, especially around uh, not just retail, but medical sciences and others, especially in innovation. Think about complex engineering tasks, building a bridge, capital investment. You can model it very, very effectively using AI now. So, and then last thing I want, not the last thing, but one more thing I want to talk about is, so we talked about positive use cases. My focus for the last couple of years has been to start thinking about what are the threat modeling and harms framework around synthetic media or deepfakes. And I tried to actually categorize them into 5 buckets, mostly. Uh, First one is individual. So essentially, we've seen a lot of deepfakes being used to create harm against women, especially using pornographic imagery of them and videos of them and circulating into closed social networks or on the dark web, essentially to more or less to sabotage their reputation and limit their agency as well. And that is a phenomena that actually people don't talk as much about, but that is a real thing that we are seeing out there. Society, we have seen some examples of using deepfakes and AI generated synthetic media to create social divisions, especially around elections. Uh, as anyway, society is polarized enough. Using this capability of using artificial voice and videos can accentuate those things. Businesses, we have seen actually recently a lot of voice cloning to do financial impropriety, essentially by impersonation of voice. In businesses, democracy, and journalism, we've seen across the globe AI-generated synthetic media and deepfakes are used to by nefarious actors to do the things that they want to do and weaponize this technology to create harm and threats. The last thing I want to talk about is, when we think about threats, how are we thinking about countermeasures to these threats? So what are the effective responses would look like if you were to create a right kind of countermeasure to these threat models that I just talked about? So the first idea is, hey, can we reduce the exposure of these manipulated media, deepfakes, by having some tactics like removal of content, differential promotions, and demonetization? Versus the other thing is, even when this information is out, when the synthetic media deepfake is out, can you help people to be more knowledgeable and discerning citizens and reduce their belief in that content? And some of the tactics there is, if you can label that content, providing additional context to that content, and obviously civic education is first and foremost. So when we talk about, again, countermeasures to deepfakes in the context of threat enhanced model, we put it into 4 buckets. Media literacy, which is making sure that the consumers actually are aware of what's going on, and there's a lot of work that is going on. In fact, the 60-minute segment that Victor was part of, again, was very focused on raising awareness of this new phenomena called deepfakes and synthetic media. Uh, Platform policies, Microsoft, Google, and Facebook, and others, we actually are thinking very, very hard about, as creators of platforms, as platforms which can spread these information, especially deepfakes, at the speed and scale, on what kind of right policies we should have on our platform so we are not part of the problem. Regulations, there are regulators across the globe who are thinking very, very actively on to have a countermeasure which can align with existing regulations, or if they have to create new regulations. And last but not least, technology, which actually will dive a lot more deeper in today's talk. So with that, I would actually give it back, Mark, to you,